everyone, my name is Kate Montserrat and I'm one of the directors at Simplify Consulting, and we're delighted to welcome you to our podcast today. I'm joined by Carl, Matt, Dom and Serena, and today we're going to be talking about propositions that address the wealth advice gap. So the wealth industry has consistently attempted to address this gap in recent years with innovative solutions to provide those with smaller or limited investment potential with an efficient and effective advice-based solution. We've seen attempts at robo-journeys, and increasingly they're sitting alongside traditional advice channels to facilitate the provision of advice for those with simple needs. So most recently, Vanguard announced their low-cost advice proposition, leveraging both traditional channels and digital solutions to provide access to advice at a more attractive price point. And today we wanted to explore how the evolution of advice will continue in the coming years in our latest podcast series. So Carl, over to you first. How would you put this new proposition into context within the market?
Yeah, I think it's the culmination of a few years of providers trying to find a way of addressing that advice gap with a scalable, commercially economical, efficient way of providing service via appropriate channels to those customers who sit in that gap, but also that enables them to provide a solution that meets other needs as well. I think traditionally when we've looked at some of the robo attempts of the past, we go back to things like Click and Invest, UBS, you look at where Nutmeg started and where that's grown to. I think historically it was very much focused on very simple, discrete propositions. And we know advice is far more holistic than that. And the traditional journeys and one-to-one relationships that people build with their advisors, their FAs, is all about kind of your whole life planning. And I think the limitations of those robo journeys has been very much about, I want a product, I want an ISA, I want a GIA, I've got some money to invest, I want a SIP. And how do those propositions provide those customers, particularly with less to invest, at that end of the market, with a solution that works for them? And obviously Vanguard have tried to do this in a really simplistic way. They've gone down the route of it's a single product, it's access into Vanguard funds, it's a really simple proposition, but it still scales and it flexes based on how much you've got to invest and where you are, I think, in your journey. I think that's a slightly different take on where some of the other providers have been in the past. And it's just nice to see, isn't it, businesses trying to find solutions for that demographic and that group, that cohort of investors, where perhaps some of the other providers out there haven't been so successful. I was looking at some numbers earlier at Nutmeg, and obviously, they've grown significantly in a very relatively short space of time. The challenge they will have, and indeed Vanguard, and there's obviously been some media attention for Vanguard recently, is are they sufficiently dominant in the market in terms of a customer brand, in terms of having a name that resonates with people to make it a success? And we've certainly seen the likes of the banks, HSBC, Barclays in particular, building robo journeys off the back of their more consumer brand awareness that exists. And I think that will be the challenge for the likes of Vanguard and the likes of Nutmeg. Are they still going after traditional kind of investors who would anyway otherwise be speaking to advisors, but trying to do it in a low-cost way? So I think that's going to be the challenge for them going forward.
Thank you, Carl. And Matt, I guess from your own personal experience, do you think this does represent a gap in the market? Is this something, for example, that you might use?
Well, so I was reading the article earlier and trying to kind of think about whether or not that's something that would appeal to me. I think if I look back at when RDR came in, and I was working in an investment contact center at the time, and it seemed to be all about previously anyone could get advice pretty much for free, well, for free, and then sort of overnight that's been withdrawn for kind of populations. I think the HSBC deemed anything under 50,000, but other companies will have different price points. But the gap in the market that I've always kind of thought of since then really is around if you haven't got a huge amount to invest, what do you do? Obviously, if you've got more to invest, you can get financial advice. If you've got less, and then obviously robos come in. I mean, the bit for me, and this is just purely from a personal perspective, I would, if I was going to make investment decisions, I think I would rather speak to someone rather than use a robo journey, which to me is still, the emphasis is on me to go and do research on who the best robo advice provider is, you know, and there's loads of them. You still got to have the confidence to be able to answer the questions that ultimately are going to lead to your investment decisions, and it's just an algorithm that's then going to put you in whatever you've set based on whatever you've said. So to me, it still feels like there's a bit of a gap. If you haven't got a huge amount to invest, where do you go if you want to speak to someone? Because unless you've got that big pot, it's probably not commercially viable to pay for advice. So it's more down that kind of perhaps restricted advice. I mean, the bits that I would be interested in personally would be, I'm less interested in protection and things like that, but if I could get retirement advice at a more affordable level without perhaps going all of market and perhaps paying for full advice, then that's perhaps an area that I would be of interest. So that, to my mind, is that still a gap? That's still a bit of an unknown to me.
Yeah, I think
it's really interesting. Sorry, Dom.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say that obviously the idea of the restrict the service, restrict the advice kind of area of the coverage, etc., but reduce the fee. Only time will tell whether this is going to actually plug the gap that we've got, but I think it's pretty evident that there is a gap there. So I think this type of offering should be encouraged, where those with smaller pots initially at least have a route to start taking advice. And I think for people who have those smaller pots, maybe younger people who will over time grow those pots, it provides quite a good route to increase the advice, increase the service over time. So I think there is something there that Vanguard are plugging.
I think one thing providers haven't done or managed to get right yet is those people like yourself, Matt, who perhaps don't have the confidence to go through it just digitally. I still think the fallout rate from those journeys is probably higher than perhaps the providers would want. And I guess the challenge is either giving people the confidence that they are making the right decision for them, or ultimately, if it drops out into another channel, then that equally presents the provider with an issue in terms of costs and servicing. I don't know. Carl, sorry, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on Dom's point. I mean, you did an interesting post recently, Dom, around intergenerational wealth transfer. And I think some providers, and it's a tricky one for new entrants, it's a tricky one for those that don't have that consumer brand, playing the long game and building those relationships so that maybe the people that don't have the money today, but in 10, 20, 25, 30 years time, through a variety of different reasons, come into money, inheritance being a great example, will still need advice. And the need for advice will be greater when you're talking about higher sums of money. And actually building some sticky relationships now at the lower end of that wealth segment might yield greater benefits in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important for people to think further down the line. I think we're on the cusp of a lot of transfer between older generations and younger generations through inheritance. And those that may have quite a small pot now may have a larger pot in a few years' time. Capturing them early may be a bit of a key there. And obviously at the moment, I think this Vanguard proposition is focusing on pensions. But if they then get that relationship there, they may very well want to choose to put their GIA and their ISA onto Vanguard and have a holistic solution and be able to see everything in one place, which will pay dividends for Vanguard in the future.
And Serena, where do you think this proposition sits kind of against just sort of pure robo advice? Is it the same? Is it different?
Yeah, no, really interesting point. I think there's quite a blend, as everybody's been talking about at the moment. It depends quite a lot on stage of life as well. Some of the activity, in your early years, you're more risk averse, generally speaking, than you would be in later years when you're thinking about what should I do, when should I finish my work, and what should I plan, and if you've got kids and dogs and houses in the equation. So I think there's a balance of both. The Vanguard proposition seems I do think there's a gap for it actually in terms of the levels and actually the security and the safety that it's with a provider rather than a broad spectrum of different funds and asset allocations and all the rest of it within. So you're actually just actively working with a company and their fund base as such, depending on, again, what your risk profile, risk appetite, because that's all going to be really important. So I think to Matt's point of not knowing some of that, and to all of your points really around that customer journey and not having the level of comfort in understanding some of that stuff when you're looking at it to start with, to say, what, I've never had a pension, what do I do with it? What should I get? What should I look for? Where Robo is really good, of course, is price point, but then Vanguard's proposition is particularly competitive in that. So where you tend to look at Robo between a 0.2% fee or a 0.9% fee, depending on now which ones are more established, we're seeing that growth quite significantly with your likes of Nutmeg, as Carl's mentioned, and Pension B. The Vanguard proposition, I think, comes in about part way at 0.75, 0.8%. So financially, affordability wise, Vanguard's still very high because you still need, even at entry level, that 50k proposition, 50k investment to actually pursue through the layers and the grades. But for somebody that is in that position, maybe mid stage of life or something, that can go through that, or indeed through circumstances inherit some funds that is of that value, you could see that in a level of comfort and how that would grow, and working with a unit, whether that's virtually and slowly as you progress through actually talking to advisors that's specified in that area. Robo's a bit more broad, a little bit more light touch. So there is a balance there, because I think whilst you might want to work through some of those layers as an individual, it is again about a personal situation that these things tend to come in. I think the advice journey from a Robo point of view has come on leaps and bounds in maybe the last 5 or 6 years to help educate individuals that are using it. We're all on our phones and our computers much more than we have ever been before anyway. So the intuitive nature and that user experience is massive for that. And I think that's when you see these virtual bots to help educate you on that path. And you see it in other industries as well, with cognitive behavior therapies and the rest of it. It's that same intuitive nature of learning about you as you're going through your life stages. You do have much more breadth with Robo, and I think that's the benefit, because particularly I think, as Dom has pointed out, and Carl, the type of ESG funds and the environmental kind of funds that are available aren't necessarily in those Vanguard type propositions, that are much more around the pensions, and they're not as broad as general investments. But I certainly think there's a playing field for both of them.
Cool. The thing I picked up is, I think your midlife, Matt.
Yeah, I wasn't to be supporting the offence to that one, but
yeah, thanks, Serena. You didn't hide that very well.
As you will grow, you will learn to use technology, Matt. That's okay.
Yeah, just get with it, Matt. And Dom, is this just a race to the bottom in terms of reduce the fee, you kind of get less service for it?
Yeah, I think first of all, if it's plugging a gap in the market, then that should only be encouraged. So, there's nothing wrong with providing a value for money service, which is going to encourage people in at the right level that previously wouldn't have had access to advice. So I don't think there's anything wrong with this proposition coming in. I think my concern would be that there's wider in the market, not that much innovation coming out. I think we've touched on some of the points. I think, how do we use data to provide a more holistic service is certainly something that some players are looking at, but I don't see that much out there that's really nailed it as yet. If they could provide a service that provided more holistic advice at a reasonable cost, then that's certainly something that should be looked for in the future. The other points around ESG that Serena just mentioned, can we make the offerings really relevant to people now, especially younger generations? Although don't want to generalize, because everyone's interested in that kind of thing. but also around life stages as well. So as we said, can we get people in to these propositions at a younger age, and actually grow as their pots grow and expand the service? So I think this proposition from Vanguard does do some of that, but does it really take into account how people live their lives now? We're buying houses, having families at older age than we used to. So have we got the capacity to grow our pension pot early enough? Do we need to have more services on offer so that we can really provide a full service wealth proposition? Obviously a challenge if you're going to try and reduce the fee, but certainly something that I want to see coming out in the marketplace at some point.
I think where it is beneficial, sorry, Kate. I think where it is beneficial, to a point, Dom, as well, is that taking you from that early stage of wherever you are in life or whatever you're doing, it should be agnostic to that now, I think, really. And where Vanguard is, you've got a minimum investment, you know that it's a minimum, and then you've got the robo that have the lower investment, but actually there's somewhere halfway in between, because £50,000 to general is quite a lot of money unless it comes from a particular direction, and not everybody can just open up a fund. Oh, yeah, you go, there's £50,000. And I think that's where it's more palatable for some to start to dabble a little bit. You see it in similar, to your point on innovation, you see it in similar stocks and shares type robo. You invest with £1 and you start learning how that pound can grow. And I think some of that could come into education from a young age, but actually it shouldn't really be about the age thing necessarily. I think there's different parts in life and different people will take to it. But from a financial planning point of view, it is all about that relationship. And I think that's what Vanguard are quite key on here, taking that customer from that early stage all the way through to their end plan. And naturally for any business, that's where the model is going to be of value to them. It's the long-term value of that customer to them.
Thanks, Serena. Cool. Thank you very much, everyone, for your thoughts and contribution. I think we all are passionate about kind of financial advice. We work with a number of amazing financial advisors and providers, and we know that it can really add value to people to help them grow their wealth and understand their financial future. Hopefully you all enjoyed the podcast. If you did want to chat to any of us about this topic, or you wanted to find out more about what we do and how we can help you, please visit our website, simplifyconsulting.co.uk, and thank you for your time.